It is my privilege to extend a laurel and hearty handshake to our new nigger.
For more than a century, Hollywood has shaped the way the world sees black people, and not always in honest or respectful ways. From the earliest silent films to today's blockbusters, the stories told on screen have reflected more than just entertainment. They've reflected the power structures, prejudices, and assumptions of the time. In the beginning, black people weren't portrayed as people at all. They were villains, clowns, or loyal servants, characters created to comfort white audiences and reinforce racist ideas. As decades passed, the roles changed, but the stereotypes stuck. We went from blackface and mammies to criminals, comic relief, and sidekicks. Even when representation increased, it often came with limits on how far black characters could go or how they were allowed to be seen. But this story isn't just about racism, it's also about resistance. Black actors, writers, and directors have pushed back every step of the way, fighting for the chance to tell real stories and show the full range of black life. And while progress has been made, the history of how we got here still shapes the industry today. This is the story of how Hollywood built, sold, and sometimes broke down stereotypes, and how those images continue to shape the way we see race, identity, and power on screen. When movies first started in the early 1900s, black people weren't treated as real people on screen. They were turned into jokes, villains, or background characters meant to make white audiences feel comfortable. At the time, Jim Crow laws kept America segregated, and Hollywood reflected that same system of racism right from the start. One of the most harmful movies ever made was The Birth of a Nation in 1915. It showed the Ku Klux Klan as heroes and painted black men, often played by white actors in blackface, as dangerous, dumb, and violent. The film was praised by politicians and even shown at the White House. It helped the KKK grow again and taught audiences that these racist ideas were normal. This set the tone for decades. Stereotypes like the mammy, a heavy, loyal black woman who only lives to serve white families, and the coon, a lazy, silly character there for laughs, became standard. Real black actors were often forced into these roles just to get work. Stepin Fetchit, one of the first black movie stars, became famous for playing a slow, subservient man that white audiences could laugh at. Even when black talent was celebrated, it came with racism attached. Hattie McDaniel made history as the first black Oscar winner for her role in Gone with the Wind, 1939. But she had to sit at a segregated table at the awards and wasn't even allowed to attend the movie's premiere in the South. This early era built the foundation for how black people were shown in film, not as full human beings, but as stereotypes created to support white stories. And once those ideas were on screen, they shaped how millions of people saw blackness for decades to come. By the 1940s and 50s, black actors were appearing in more movies, but the types of roles they got didn't really change. Hollywood still didn't see them as full characters with real stories. They were mostly there to serve white leads, make them look good, or provide a laugh. Representation existed, but it was built on stereotypes. Most roles for black performers were maids, butlers, cooks, drivers, or entertainers. They were rarely the heroes or the main characters. These characters were often kind, loyal, and harmless, traits designed to make white audiences feel comfortable. The message was simple. Black people could be part of the story as long as they stayed in the background and knew their place. Some actors, like Eddie Rochester Anderson from the Jack Benny program, became household names playing these kinds of characters. Stepin Fetchit's lazy, slow-talking persona continued to shape how white America saw black men. Films often included a funny black character for comic relief, never a complex figure with real struggles or depth. Even musical icons like Cab Calloway or Lena Horne were usually limited to singing scenes that could be easily cut when movies were shown in the segregated South. Hollywood often claimed it was giving opportunities to black performers, but those opportunities were tightly controlled. It was rare to see a black character with a serious story arc, ambitions, or leadership. Even when they were portrayed as friendly or helpful, they were written to be dependent on white characters or to support them. This era built a dangerous idea, that diversity meant inclusion only if it stayed non-threatening. Black actors could be on screen, but not as equals, leaders, or complex human beings. It was a system that said, "We'll let you in, but we'll decide how you're shown." And those limits shaped how audiences, black and white, understood race in America for decades to come. By the 1970s, the civil rights movement had changed America, and Hollywood started to change too. Black audiences were demanding to see themselves as more than servants or sidekicks. Studios saw a new market, and suddenly, black leads were front and center in a wave of films known as blaxploitation. These movies promised power, pride, and representation, but they also brought a new set of problems. Films like Shaft, Superfly, and Foxy Brown put black heroes on the big screen for the first time. They were strong, confident, and in control, a huge shift from the stereotypes of the past. These characters fought corrupt cops, took revenge, ran their neighborhoods, and broke free from white authority. For many black viewers, it was empowering to finally see people who looked like them as the main character instead of the joke. But the celebration didn't last long. Critics, activists, and even some black filmmakers started pointing out how many of these films still leaned on stereotypes, just dressed up differently. The heroes were often pimps, drug dealers, or criminals. Women were over-sexualized and rarely more than love interests. And even though the stories were centered on black characters, most of the money and creative control still belonged to white producers and studio heads. There were exceptions. Directors like Melvin Van Peebles used the genre to challenge racism and show real black resistance. His work inspired future filmmakers and proved that black stories could be told with authenticity and power. But Hollywood quickly took the formula and turned it into a profitable trend, often losing the original message. The blaxploitation era was complicated. It broke barriers and gave audiences something they'd never had before: black leads who owned the screen. But it also showed how deeply stereotypes were built into the system, even when the faces on screen changed. The question it left behind still matters today. Was this true progress, or just the same old stereotypes in new clothes? After the blaxploitation era ended, Hollywood shifted gears again. By the 1980s, black actors were appearing in more mainstream movies than ever before. But even with more screen time, they were still rarely the center of the story. The industry had simply changed the formula. Instead of maids or servants, black characters were now sidekicks, comic relief, or supporting roles meant to help the white lead shine. In buddy cop movies, action comedies, and dramas, black actors often played the funny partner, the loyal friend, or the streetwise side character. Eddie Murphy in 48 Hours and Chris Tucker in Rush Hour were breakout stars, but their roles were built around supporting white co-stars. Even in films that broke the usual dynamic, like Rush Hour, which paired Chris Tucker with Jackie Chan, the black character was still mostly there for laughs. The formula was evolving, but the deeper problem remained. Black characters were rarely given complex, layered stories. Even when they were leads, the characters were written to entertain, not explore deeper realities. This pattern repeated across genres from sitcoms to blockbusters. Black characters were visible, but their stories were still not the focus. Hollywood also leaned heavily into stereotypes during this period. Many black characters were portrayed as criminals, drug dealers, or trapped in poverty. Storylines that reinforced negative ideas instead of challenging them. At the same time, comic relief roles became more common, reducing black characters to punchlines and catchphrases rather than meaningful representation. There were important exceptions that broke the mold. Spike Lee's Do the Right Thing, 1989, tackled racism head-on, and John Singleton's Boys in the Hood, 1991, offered a powerful, realistic look at black life in America. These films proved the potential of black storytelling when given space to explore deeper narratives. But they were often treated as niche or independent projects, while the mainstream machine kept repeating the same old patterns. This era showed that visibility isn't the same as progress. Black actors were on screen, winning awards, and becoming box office draws. But most were still limited by scripts written from a white perspective. Hollywood had updated its stereotypes, but it still hadn't given black characters full control of their stories. The 2000s marked a turning point. After decades of being written by others, black creators started taking control of their own stories. And with that came a wave of change Hollywood could no longer ignore. Directors, writers, and producers who once struggled to get a foot in the door were now shaping the narrative themselves, showing the world that black stories could be powerful, complex, and profitable. Filmmakers like Ava DuVernay, Selma When They See Us, Barry Jenkins, Moonlight, and Ryan Coogler, Black Panther, proved that movies centered on black experiences could win Oscars, break box office records, and spark global conversations. Jordan Peele's Get Out became a cultural phenomenon, blending horror with commentary on racism in a way Hollywood had never seen before. These projects didn't just include black characters, they explored black identity, history, and power on their own terms. Representation also expanded in front of the camera. Black superheroes, scientists, and political leaders began appearing in mainstream films, roles that would have been almost unthinkable decades earlier. More stories focused on joy, love, creativity, and everyday life, challenging the idea that black films had to be about struggle or pain to be taken seriously. But the shift isn't complete, and progress hasn't always meant evolution. While many black filmmakers push for depth and authenticity, others continue to lean on outdated stereotypes because they're safe, familiar, and profitable. Franchises like Tyler Perry's Medea movies, for example, are beloved by many audiences, but have also been criticized for reinforcing caricatures rather than challenging them. The same goes for certain hood dramas or gangster films, which often repeat harmful tropes about black life instead of offering new perspectives. The difference today is that the fight is happening inside Hollywood, not just outside of it. Black creators now have a platform and an audience, and they're using both to push for deeper change, even while debating among themselves what authentic representation should look like. The progress is real, but so is the work that's left to do. For the first time, black filmmakers are no longer just reacting to the system. They're rewriting it and redefining what it means to tell black stories on their own terms. Looking back at the last 100 years of film, it's clear that Hollywood has changed, but not nearly enough. We've gone from caricatures and blackface to blockbuster leads and award-winning directors. But if you look closer, you'll see how many of the same problems still exist, just in new forms. The industry may look more diverse on the surface, but power behind the scenes is still far from equal. Yes, there's been real progress. There are more black filmmakers telling their own stories and more complex human characters on screen than ever before. But there are also projects that keep repeating the same lazy stereotypes. There are still gatekeepers deciding which stories are marketable and which ones aren't. And there's still pressure on black creators to fit into certain boxes if they want to succeed. This history isn't just something to look back on. It's a reminder of what still needs to change. The fight for fair, honest representation isn't over. It's still happening every day in writers' rooms, casting calls, and studio boardrooms. And the real victory will be when black stories don't have to fight for space, when they're simply part of the story of Hollywood, told fully and without limits.